I got an article coming out later today. If you believe in the Mariners offense for this year, really, if you believe in the Mariners for this year, there's like 5 things you've got to really commit to believing in. I said it a little bit yesterday. I wrote about it last night. It'll be up shortly. You've got to believe in the rotation, staying healthy and being dominant again, right? You've got to believe that these guys are going to bounce back. JP and Jorge and Garver, et cetera, and Julio all have to bounce back, by the way, without anybody else going in the tank. Hard to do. You've got to, at the center of it all, maybe should even be number 1. You have to believe in the power of Dan and Edgar and what happened the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season rather than what's been happening for the previous 3 years. You have to believe that this same argument we've made over and over again. Well, it's 5 weeks of a season at the beginning of the year. It doesn't mean anything. We're only at May 15th. We can't possibly. I've said this literally a gazillion times. I'm not going to judge this team based on the first 5-6 weeks of the season. It's a 6-month season. How then can you judge them based on the last 5 or 6 weeks? It doesn't make any sense. So that one is going to be really hard for me. Flexibility, I said this before, you don't have a lot of veterans, so maybe there's ways you can, eliminate guys that aren't playing well early by optioning them to the minors rather than sticking with them. And you or at least should still have some dry powder to add early in this season through the trade deadline if you need to or want to. You've got the prospects you didn't trade, you've got pitching you didn't trade, and you should have a little bit of money that you didn't spend. So all of those things should allow you to continue to build and fill whatever holes develop, especially if other teams fall off. You got to believe all of those things if you're going to believe that the Mariners are going to be better in 2025 than 2024, where they fell off by 4 games from the year before that and 6 from the year before that. Right? Remember, they got to get to at least 90, you've got to think. That's got to be like your minimum. Well, to get to 90, you got to win 6 more games than you did last year. Not like you got to be as good as you were last year. You got to win 6 more. So when Jerry talks, he's giving you some real optimism. Here's some of his optimism right here.
We had a few guys last year who came out and didn't have their best season and or got off to slow starts. We added Victor Robles in midseason. We added Randy Arozarena at the trade deadline. We get a full season from what we hope is a resurgent JP Crawford. And we get perhaps the second half of Julio rather than the first.
Okay, so the first part of that, I actually buy. I'm going to tell you what. The first part of that, I'm with Jerry. You get a full season of Arozarena and Robles. Those guys made a difference last year. They really did. The offense was better after they added those guys. And I believe that had more to do with what happened in the last 5 or 6 weeks than anything else. But you added them at the deadline. When you did it, you added them for not just last year, but for this year. And I think that is part of this season's off-season plan, is that you already fixed left field. Right, that was a hole. You fixed it at the deadline, and so the fact that it happened then is supposed to now. I don't necessarily hold that against Jerry. So yeah, you get a full season of those guys, and hopefully, yes, you get more of JP Crawford and you get second half Julio. That would be great. What if Cal Raleigh has a bad year? Wouldn't that offset whatever you get from one of those guys? What if Luke Raley drops his OPS by 150 points, a guy you're counting on to play first or the outfield nearly every day? Like, those things aren't impossible. Quite frankly, they're just as likely as the other guys bouncing back. Like, people have bad years all the time. We talk about this to explain why Polanco had a bad year, why Julio had a bad first half, why JP was down. Well, what if Arozarena has an awful year? What if in some crazy cockamamie world, Victor Robles isn't the player he was for 3 months last year and is somewhat closer to the guy he'd been for the entirety of his career before that? That wouldn't, blow me away, would it? Yeah, I appreciate the optimism, and you should be hopeful this time of year. And there are some reasons to be hopeful for this Mariner team. It's not necessarily the disaster that it's always being painted to be. There are some good things about this team. There really are. But when you put it that way and you start trying to sell that the team is better than we think and the offense has been better than we think, and we'll go over that sound here in a few minutes, you're not giving the full picture. And I think today's fan is too smart to only give them part of the picture. They're too savvy. They have too much information at their fingertips. And Jerry might argue, yeah, they have too much information at their fingertips. They don't know how to synthesize it. He might be right. But it's really hard to sell them on just the positive parts when they're perfectly capable of finding the negatives as well.